Hello everybody. Today's love of reading is called The Bus, and it's an American short story written in 1965 by a writer called Shirley Jackson. And it features the unfortunate and slightly terrifying experiences of the elderly Miss Harper when she falls asleep on a bus journey and misses her stop. I hope you enjoy it. It probably raises more questions than it answers, and it's definitely slightly terrifying. Here goes. Miss Harper was going home, although the night was wet and nasty. Miss Harper disliked travelling at any time, and she particularly disliked travelling on this dirty small bus, which was her only way of getting home. She'd frequently complained to the bus company about their service because it seemed that no matter where she wanted to go, they had no respectable bus to carry her. Getting away from home was bad enough. Miss Harper was fond of pointing out to the bus company, but getting home seemed very close to impossible. Tonight, Miss Harper had no choice. If she did not go home by this particular bus, she could not go home for another day. Miss Harper ordered her ticket, deploring her own cross voice, and the old man slapped it down on the counter in front of her and said, "You got 3 minutes before the bus leaves." There were already several people sitting in the bus, and Miss Harper wondered where they could possibly be going. Were there really this many small towns served only by this bus? Were there really other people who would endure this kind of trip to get somewhere, even home? "I'm very out of sorts," Miss Harper thought, "very out of sorts. It's too strenuous a visit for a woman of my age. I need to get home." She thought of a hot bath and a cup of tea and her own bed, and she sighed. She was aware that the bus had started because she was rocked and bounced in her seat, and the feeling of rattling and throbbing beneath the soles of her shoes stayed with her even when at last she slept. She lay back uneasily, her head resting on the seat back, moving with the motion of the bus, and around her other people slept or spoke softly or stared blankly out of the windows at the passing lights and at the rain. Sometime during her sleep, Miss Harper was jostled by someone moving into the seat behind her. Her head was pushed and her hat disarranged. She slept uncomfortably and awkwardly, her mouth a little open. Then some while later she became aware of the bus driver shaking her. "Look, lady," he was saying, "I'm not an alarm clock. Wake up and get off the bus." "What?" Miss Harper stirred, opened her eyes, felt for her pocketbook. "I'm not an alarm clock," the driver said. His voice was harsh and tired. "What?" said Miss Harper again. "This is as far as you go. You got a ticket here. You've arrived, and I am not an alarm clock waking up people to tell them when it's time to get off. You got here, lady, and it's not part of my job to carry you off the bus." "I intend to report you," Miss Harper said, awake. She felt for her pocketbook and found it in her lap, moved her feet, straightened her hat. She was stiff and moving was difficult. "Report me, but from somewhere else. I got a bus to run. Now, will you please get off so I can get on my way?" His voice was loud, and Miss Harper was sickeningly aware of faces turned towards her from along the bus, grins, amused comments. The driver turned and stamped off down the bus to his seat, saying, "She thinks I'm an alarm clock." And Miss Harper, without assistance and moving clumsily, took down her suitcase and struggled with it down the aisle. The suitcase banged against seats, and she knew that people were staring at her. She was terribly afraid that she might stumble and fall. "You ought to be ashamed of yourself," Miss Harper said wildly, wanting to cry. "Lady," the bus driver said with elaborate patience, "please get off my bus." The door was open, and Miss Harper eased herself and her suitcase onto the steep step, then onto the ground outside. The bus started with a jerk, almost throwing her backward, and Miss Harper, for the first time in her life, wanted to run and shake her fist at someone. "I'll report him," she thought. "I'll see that he loses his job." And then she realised that she was in the wrong place. Standing quite still in the rain and the darkness, Miss Harper became aware that she was not at the bus corner of her town, where the bus should have left her. She was on an empty crossroads in the rain. There were no stores, no lights, no taxis, no people. There was nothing, in fact, but a wet dirt road under her feet and a signpost where two roads came together. "Don't panic," Miss Harper told herself, almost whispering. "Don't panic, it's all right, it's all right. You'll see that, it's all right, don't be frightened." She took a few steps in the direction the bus had gone, but it was out of sight. And when Miss Harper called falteringly, "Come back," and "Help," there was no answer to the shocking sound of her own voice, except the steady drive of the rain. She turned in a circle, her suitcase in her hand, and told herself, "Don't panic, it's all right." There was no shelter in sight, but the signpost said, "Ricketts Landing." "So that's where I am," Miss Harper thought. "I've come to somewhere called Ricketts Landing, and I don't like it here." She set her suitcase down next to the signpost and tried to see down the road. Perhaps there might be a house or even some kind of barn or shed where she could get out of the rain. She was crying a little and lost and hopeless when she saw headlights far off down the road and realised that someone was really coming to help her. She ran to the middle of the road and stood waving, her gloves wet and her pocketbook draggled. "Here," she called, "here I am, please come and help me." Through the sound of the rain, she could hear the motor, and then the headlights caught her, and suddenly embarrassed, she put her pocketbook in front of her face. The lights belonged to a small truck which came to an abrupt stop beside her. The window near her was rolled down, and a man's voice said furiously, "You want to get killed? You trying to get killed or something? What are you doing in the middle of the road trying to get killed?" The young man turned and spoke to the driver. "It's some dame running out into the road like that." "Please," Miss Harper said, as he seemed about to close the window again, "please help me. The bus put me off here when it wasn't my stop and I'm lost." The two young men looked at each other. "Take her down to the old ladies," one of them said. Miss Harper had never climbed up into a truck before, and her skirt was tight and her gloves were slippery from the rain. Without help from the young man, she put one knee on the high step and somehow hoisted herself in. "This cannot be happening to me," she thought clearly. The young man pulled away with a look of distaste as Miss Harper slid onto the seat next to him. The driver started the truck and they moved slowly down the road and through the mud and the rain. The windshield wipers swept back and forth hypnotically. There was a narrow line of sight ahead from the highlights, and Miss Harper thought, "What is happening to me?" Ahead of them, a light flickered dimly through the rain, and the driver pointed and said, "There, that's where we're going." As they came closer, Miss Harper was aware of a growing dismay. The light belonged to what seemed to be a roadhouse, and Miss